Imam Tweedy is one of the world's leading imams and a highly regarded scholar of the Quran and Islamic history. He's nicknamed the Imam of Peace. He is known for his outspoken and honest discussion of the culture and ideological problems within the religion. I want to sit down with him to learn more about the true history of Islam. Welcome to UK, Imam Tweedy.
Thank you very much, brother.
And for the people who are just watching this who don't know who you are, you have probably become the most famous imam in the world for people, I'd say, that are on our side of the circle. Do you want to explain to them why that is? Or do you want me to explain why it is?
Well, I'd like you to explain it from your point of view.
I'll say from my point of view, you've become the first religious imam that has come out and said what I think many of the times needs to be said. You talk about taking violent passages out of the scripture. You challenge the scripture. And yeah, it's really, because we first had contact when? We first had contact when I was leading the English Defence League. And even when we had that contact then, I was surprised, if I'm honest, because I'm leading the biggest street protest movement against Islam at the time. Every Muslim leader was very critical. You wasn't. More so, you sort of reached out at that time, talking openly, yeah.
Indeed. I travelled to Iran, where I was born originally, but we migrated to Australia. I went back to Iran in 2006, and I engaged in my studies. And during my studies, I saw a lot of corruption within the political system of how the Islamic governments control the students and what they study, which at the end leads to missionaries coming to the West from these Islamic governments, being trained and funded. And I was once upon a time one of these missionaries that would be sent around the world to Canada and so on to preach Sharia law, spreading the caliphate under different names, Islamic government, or and even Sharia courts and so on. When I saw this corruption, I criticized them. I paid a very heavy price, interrogations, prisons, and then
in Iran?
In
you
Iran.
You was in prison in Iran?
Yes.
For challenging it in 2006?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
And it was actually 2012.
2012, okay.
Yes, in Iran. And I moved to Iraq, and I got involved in a few media projects. And then after I saw that my presence in Iraq is actually silencing a lot of what I can do, I moved out to the West and I started using social media to criticize the corruption.
Okay. And that's when we spoke in 2012.
Yes.
Because even when you spoke to me then, you received backlash, yeah?
Indeed. And I was very surprised to see your approach, because I knew that there are people that hate Islam and Muslims, but you were approaching the whole situation from a very political perspective, and you were very different from other people. Like even when there were people that would go out and cause violence, I saw you to be a bit more different. You came out on television and you knew what you were talking about.
Yeah.
And that encouraged me to reach out to you. And I think we spoke about terminologies and how you could win a lot of my type of Muslims over by directing the blame onto Wahhabis and Salafis rather than other small minorities.
Yeah, because I gathered so you were a Shia.
Yes.
And you said a lot of our problems, which I have many Shias tell me this, but then I have many Sunnis say the opposite. So I have many Shias who would say to me that that what you're angry about is the Salafists, it's the Wahhabists, it's the Saudis. That's what I should be angry about. That's the problems that I see, and that's pretty much, I think, at the time what you was getting at.
Yes, but there were other things that I didn't tell you, because I was living within those areas and my communications could be monitored. The Shia also have problems with Hezbollah and the Iranian regime, and we've seen what they've been doing lately. So yeah, I think it's more of terminologies that, if used properly, can actually lead to better results when clashing with them in the media or even on diplomatic level.
So right now, as an imam, what are you fighting for? Reformation of Islam?
I say reformation of Islam, but in reality I know very well there will never be a reformation.
You know very well there'll never be a reformation.
There will never be a reformation of Islam.
I'm glad you said that.
But we will need to pave the way for a potential reformation in a few centuries' time.
So when we hear that, from my point of view, because we have so many reformist Muslims in the UK, such as Majid Nawaz and Quilliam, who basically, this is a massive career for them. And they're selling a lie that we will reform Islam in the next generation. And it's like we've had 1400 years, it's not reformed. When someone's tried to reform it, we've had Wahhabists, Abdul Wahhab, who tried to reform Islam, and we brought it back to the core, what I'd say is violent teachings. But you don't see there is any opportunity or any chance to reform?
The idea of reforming something that was once upon a time introduced as perfect, it doesn't make sense. It's already perfect. So it's not like Islam was introduced in Mecca as another option or a theory or a new way of life. It was introduced as the perfect and the only way of life for all human beings. And when you come with such an approach, it's very hard to turn around and say, let's reform what is already perfect. What the Wahhabis did is that he sold a bigger lie, and he said, hey, let's live how the Prophet Muhammad lived, because that's the perfect image of man. So then he's more of a fundamentalist rather than a reformer in modern times. What I believe in when it comes to reform is that there will be a type of reform, but it's reformed individuals like myself. It will be a reformed Muslim community of third and fourth generation migrants, Muslim migrants to the UK, to Canada, to America, to Australia. People who no longer feel the attachment to what's happening in Syria and Iraq. For example, if most of these Middle Eastern families today have satellite dishes in their homes, whether they be legally or illegally, they have satellite dishes, and some of them require permits in certain countries such as Australia, some don't. When a father watches bombings happening in Syria, that emotional attachment of, yeah, let's send money to Syria, only exists within the father. It will no longer exist within the son and then the grandson. When you watch something in the news, you feel in debt to go and help out, interfering with what's happening over there.
See, the problem is, we see the opposite though. On the ground in the UK, the first generations that come were not extreme. The extreme, in fact, every generation we go through in the British Muslim community, they get worse and worse. Their views and their intolerance gets worse. And that's, by any Pew research or any research, it shows that actually, even for example, it's the youngsters now. The majority of terrorist attacks now are 17 to 24-year-olds. That's the majority of arrests, and now youngsters. And that we've seen that change over the last 20 years, from being elder Muslims to then going into the youngsters. So for us to think, I've said so many times, what we need is a worldwide revolution within the Islamic community to get rid of the hatred. But that's not what we see. So, you know, say I'm an Englishman, and should I sit here, or should our country sit here and gamble on the chance? What do you think the realistic opportunity is for there to be a revolution, or for there to be a mass uprising from Muslim youth who are going to throw away their detachment to this extremism?
It will never happen.
It will never happen. So as an Englishman, see, this is why I say we have to stop Islam. We don't have to stop extremist Islam. We don't have to stop radical Muslims. We have to stop Islam in the UK. And I say that in the sense that I'm a father of three. When I look at what previous forefathers done in this nation to protect and preserve a safe and prosperous Britain for the next generation of children, we're sitting by and hiding behind political correctness to sit here and watch as last year 2,000 British Muslims returned from fighting for ISIS. We're just sitting here like sitting ducks. And that's why. I have to. What would you do if you was an Englishman, if you was a non-Muslim, sitting in a country that's ravaged by Islam, that's seen 3 brutal terrorist attacks in the last 12 months, 4, killing children, killing women, sitting eating dinner, stabbed in the neck. We've seen all of this. We've seen 12 prevented. What would you do?
I wouldn't blame you for any of the opinions you hold, and probably I would have the same stance and position towards such an ideology. However, we need to be very realistic. We could sit down and discuss and talk and share emotions and even propose certain things in parliaments and draft bills, but if we're not realistic, we're not going to be reaching a result. And this is how I am very different from many people that I sit with. We need to be realistic. Now, you want to stop Islam. Islam's never going to stop.
No, okay, I want to stop its influence in Britain.
You're never going to be able to. Let me tell you why. As much as I want to stop the radicals in Sydney, in Australia, it's very difficult, and this is why. Let's look at the Jewish community. The Jewish community, For tens of centuries, they've been persecuted, massacred and killed. They never had a government to protect them before Israel. They don't have Sharia law tables in the streets and in the city calling people to Judaism, dawah. In fact, when a Jewish man wants to marry a lady and she decides to convert into Judaism, it's a very hard process for her to become Jewish. And amongst all of these problems, Judaism still exists, and there are many Jewish people out there. It's not easy to take a religion and just hope for it to vanish or stop it. It doesn't work like that. Especially when you look at the statistics and how much they are growing and the children they are having. Most Muslim families, in fact, most Middle Eastern families, mostly the Muslim of them, amongst them, drive vans and big cars. Why? Because...
6, 7 kids.
Exactly.
Is that a fluke? Is that a fluke? Or is that population jihad?
Look, my mother has 11 siblings. She's number 12, and one of them died from one mother and one father. When you're dealing with such a mentality that says, hey, lots of children is a beautiful thing in life.
Is that the reason? That's the point I'm making. Is that the reason, or is it literally population rise in order to conquer areas?
I will tell you this. Before the government of Saudi Arabia and before the influence of the Iranian Revolution, it was very normal and it would be seen cultural, it's a national practice for certain countries to have families to have lots of children.
It was for the Irish as well.
But now, I do believe that there are actually political movements behind that.
Okay.
To actually fund families that have lots of children.
Yeah.
And we see that in Ahwaz, in Iran, between Iran and southern Iraq.
In order to change the demographics,
region, yes.
so they have control of that area.
And they're funded by the Saudis. Funded by the Saudis.
Okay.
Father, don't worry, we'll take care of your children.
We'll take care of everything.
Just make children.
Make children, yeah. Okay, so, yeah, because we see the same. You know when you say there's not much we could do, say for example to halt that in the UK, all we'd have to do is stop the benefits for more than 2 children. And that would pretty instantly stop the ability for people to have, say for example, my local imam, Kadir, yeah? He has 3 wives and 14 children, yeah, that we pay for. So, and there's so many Muslim families like that across the UK, but we're paying for it. If we didn't have a benefit system that gave them and provided for that, they wouldn't be in a position to do it unless Saudis pulled out their wallets, which they probably would as well. But when you say there's not much we can do to halt it, I think there is. I think we could be stopping Muslim immigration into the UK. I think we could halt the benefit system for more than 2 children. We could stop any Saudi or Iranian or Qatari money coming into this country. We can outlaw all aspects of Sharia law in the UK. We can make it. If someone wants to be a peaceful, kind Muslim, fine. You live your life in Britain, we welcome you. If you want to be a radical extremist, then we need to make your life absolutely impossible. So that's where I see as, because you're right, you have to be realistic in it. Realistically, we have 3 million, 4 million, probably more like 6 million Muslims in the UK. Do I want to deport every one of them? No, of course I don't. Some of the best people I've met growing up in my hometown have been Muslim. But we do have to limit the influence that this ideology has on our country. And if people don't, when you say, if people don't want to live under freedom and democracy, they can leave.
Indeed.
They can leave.
I agree. Now, cutting the funding and so on, do you really think that's realistic?
As in the sense of because they own so much of our country?
Yeah.
Am I right? I think Saudis own every port in the UK. They own the percentage of the stock market. But that's when you come to the point of basically they've bought our country. They've bought our
legally.
Legally, they've bought our country. They own Westfield Shopping Centre. They own Harrods. They own the majority of London, and but that is that is something where our politicians have sold our land and sold our people out. So the British public would halt their money tomorrow, and if that meant having less money in your paycheck at the end of the month, we'd have less money. If that meant entering into a recession, we'd enter into a recession. We don't want blood money in our country, which is what we have. Mm-hmm. So what do you not think that's realistic then?
I think it is a realistic vision. But to implement it, it's a whole different story. I don't think the UK government would be willing to cut ties with Saudi Arabia and Qatar that owns many mansions within the UK, massive buildings in very prominent locations. I don't think
they've bought their way. They've bought our country.
Therefore, I think we need to start from a whole different angle. Instead of going after the finance, look, any radical in the UK can write a book. A man sitting in Saudi Arabia can buy 1 million copies of that book. And that's how the transaction is made, through royalties. It doesn't really need to be through embassies.
Okay.
You can't stop money from coming from A to B. They can send you a lady wearing lots of gold, and then she gives you the gold. And no tax in airports, it's her jewelry. There are many methods these people use, and trust me, this is their field.
They're already doing all of that.
They know how to scam the system. They know all the loopholes. I think what we need to do is take down these Sharia courts that you have.
Yep.
Sharia courts and this scam of halal certification.
You're against halal certification?
Yes, I'm not against halal food.
You're against the certification which generates the money which then propagates and supports terrorism.
These two main wings of the Muslim community in the UK, the Sharia courts, which have no legitimacy whatsoever on this land to begin with. It goes against the constitution.
Why do you think our government have allowed them?
Governments are a combination of organizations that need money. What makes a government? Several organizations put together, and they need money to survive. When you look at Sharia courts, in reality, I brought up Sharia courts and that issue because it's a very minor issue.
Yeah.
What's greater than that is trying to stop the UK educational system from taking money from the Saudi royals. That's much greater. That I can't tackle. But I could tackle Sharia courts by bringing victims and having their cases being addressed in Parliament, and then slowly suing the court itself. So Sharia court is something we can manage to go against. Very realistic. Sharia court can be tackled in this country. Polygamy, FGM, these sort of issues. But if we're going to say, let's stop the educational system from taking money from Saudi Arabia, and King Walid has this much in Oxford, and this guy has that chair in another university.
They're buying into all the major universities.
You can't stop an educational system. It's a business. We can't stop it.
Okay.
But Sharia court is not a government department. It's government registered, and it's licensed as a ministry. But it can be dealt with if we can prove their flaws in a legal way. The halal certification,
which you can do easily, because there's so many victims who have been sent back to violent husbands. There's children that have been taken off their parents, like under Sharia, when a child gets to the age of 7, taken straight off the father and taken straight off the mother, given to the father.
Yes.
That's all happening in the UK already. That's happening right now. But yeah, you know halal certification.
yes,
Do you agree that funds terrorism?
I agree that some halal certification authorities fund terrorism.
Because most people in this country, especially our politicians, when they hear us moan about halal, like this is the reason why we moan about halal. Yeah, when if I'm eating some, and the fact that it's not labelled in any of our supermarkets, but when you're eating some chicken, the thought that somehow that's funding freedom fighters or jihadists somewhere in this globe, and we're made to look, they look upon us like we're stupid when we say this. But here you are, an imam. You're an imam. You obviously know what you're talking about with regards to halal certification, and even you accept that some of the money goes to freedom fighting and terrorism.
The largest
freedom fighting being freedom fighting.
Yeah, the largest halal certification authority on earth is in Indonesia. They produce everything from meat to noodles, the migraine. It's everywhere.
And do they even have the halal certification? Even covers the delivery.
Everything.
The delivery has to be halal certified. The delivery company.
Not necessarily.
Because I thought that's what they were looking to branch into now. Because I think we've opened five new abattoirs in the UK. Imported, I believe, 5,000 Pakistani halal butchers.
Yes, you can say it has to be a Muslim driver that delivers it, but it's actually the one who slaughters and the one who prepares the meat, the animal. The Indonesian halal certification authorities have direct and public links with the Muhammadiyah organization responsible for the Bali bombings. And there's no halal certification authority on earth that doesn't have either directly or indirectly links with Indonesian halal certification authorities. Now, how you're going to prove that is a mission, but there are links. It's impossible. Indonesia in itself plays a big role in the economy, in the halal industry, globally, even in Australia, everywhere. And I said, from noodles to meat, it's everything.
Are you surprised when you come to the UK, when you drive through London? Are you surprised just how many of the restaurants and everything is halal? Has that surprised you, or was you expecting entire areas?
Allow me to say one thing. I cancelled 22 Uber requests yesterday because the drivers were Muslim.
You cancelled them. Is that because you're scared?
Yes.
And just to get, so I didn't make that point at first, because of your outspokenness, because how you have people wanting to kill you and murder you.
Yes. And
there's been people arrested, am I right?
Yes, they've been arrested.
In Australia?
In Australia.
For planning to murder you?
Attacking me.
And you was
charged
attacked?
Of assault, yes.
Someone do your car, if I remember?
Yes, my car's been vandalised, ISIS all over it.
ISIS.
There's currently a court case going on.
You speak about taking violent verses out of scripture within Islam.
Correct.
Am I correct? Which verses?
When
in which magnitude? Do you talk about hadith, or do you talk about separating the Quran, Mecca, Medina?
Hadith. The Quran itself is untouchable.
You wouldn't support?
It's not I wouldn't support. It's I'm a realistic person.
Okay.
You can take all the Qurans and ban them. They've memorized them. I've memorized a lot of it. So a religion that was founded upon oral transmission can't be taken away. You can't correct anything.
Do you know who Mohammed Taha was? Mohammed Taha from Sudan. Because, see, this is, just so I can get onto the reformists in the UK, you admit a lot of problems that are there in Islam. Reformists in the UK, we have Majid Nawaz, we have Quilliam. They named their organisation after Quilliam. Quilliam was a Muslim who opened the first mosque in the UK, who actually sided with radicals and wanted the world caliphate. And so Mohammed Taha was another one in Sudan. He's a true reformist who, well, I feel, who was murdered. He was killed, sentenced to death, because he wanted to separate Mecca and Medina Qurans. You don't think there's any realistic opportunity of there being an answer there? In taking, because obviously you accept there's a lot of violence in the Quran.
Yes.
You do accept that there's incitement to murder non-Muslims in the Quran.
Yes.
You accept that.
Yes.
You accept that there's even incitement to murder non-Muslims who haven't done anything other than be non-Muslim.
Even murder Muslims who don't agree with you.
Who don't agree with you.
But it's not about separating Mecca and Medina Quran. It's still going to exist.
Yeah.
And like I said, Muhammad Taha would be working on reforming a community around him, not the whole faith, not paving the way for an ultimate reformation in a few centuries. This is what I want done.
Yeah.
I believe that if we introduced a different interpretation to the current interpretation, that would solve a lot of problems. For example, when the Quran says, and fight the disbelievers, in reality, the disbelievers isn't an absolute statement to fight everyone that doesn't believe in you. It was referring to those people in Mecca that had placed Muhammad in exile and so on. Because don't forget, when Muhammad was in Mecca, Muslims went over 50 people. It wasn't even an official religion, like 50 people have an idea, like so what? Later on, when they moved to Medina, it became official. But then there were still only 300 people. Muhammad died, and his army, his entire army, were only 3,000 people. There's a lot of nonsense that's been introduced within the books of hadith that show you Muhammad was a massive leader of a huge army from the east to the west. It doesn't work like that. It wasn't like that. Muhammad died, and his army were 3,000 people, led by a man called Usama after him. 3,000 people, and they were all lazy and disobedient. They betrayed him in many battles. Uhud was one of them. So looking at this aspect of the Prophet Muhammad and looking at the society he preached in, he wasn't preaching to Oxford students. You know, a bunch of...
Well, in fact, a lot of them were criminals.
Criminals.
He went out to the mountains and got all the criminals and brought them all in on the rampage.
And you're dealing with a community with the lowest level of IQ Arabia had ever seen, burying their daughters alive. Why? Because she's a daughter.
At the time, yeah, which is...
But why would you bury your daughter? Because...
Yeah, sorry.
Why would you bury your daughter? Because if war happens, she gets taken hostage, and then I look bad. Well, then don't go to war. It's as simple as that. But you're dealing with that type of mentality, and this level of intellect. And I believe, bring another interpretation, which is more logical. Like, yes, Muhammad had a problem with these type of disbelievers. Doesn't mean Tawhidi has a problem with Tommy Robinson.
The idea, what you're saying, is introduce a new interpretation. Like, even just doing that. Say, for example, I had a disagreement the other day with a young Muslim who was telling me that it doesn't say in the Quran anywhere to kill innocents. And I said, but then we get down to the word innocence, or we get down to who's innocent. And we have, do you know Ibn Kathir?
Kathir.
Ibn Kathir, who's one of the world's most recognised Islamic scholars, who simply says that disobedience, so in the verse, say 533, where it says kill those who cause corruption or disobedience. Disobedience simply means being non-Muslim. So that simply gives fair game to anyone who follows his teachings, which is the majority of the Sunni world, to go out and kill non-Muslims because they're non-Muslims, because they're disobeying Allah by not believing in him. So what you want to do, what you want to introduce, or what you see as a solution to the problems we're in, how do you see that's possible at that level?
Firstly, you quoted Ibn Kathir.
Yeah.
Ibn Kathir is the biggest ideological terrorist we have ever seen in the history of Islamic scripture. Ibn Kathir, Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, all of them are terrorists. Bukhari...
Terrorists in your view, but the majority of British Muslims who follow the Sunni sect would be idolising them.
It's got nothing to do with Sunni sect.
No?
Bukhari has even influenced the supreme leader of Iran, the Shia.
Okay.
Many of the Shia tafsirs, interpretation of the Quran,
From Bukhari.
reference Bukhari.
Okay.
Even though not take from him a lot, but they still reference him and they quote him. My problem is with the scriptures that say Islam is an absolute religion and its scriptures are absolute, therefore they are to be applied in every place and every time. I believe the Quran can be divided into certain aspects. One, a historical aspect. The wars and the problems that happened in the past were part of the development of the religion. And we could also argue 7th century Christianity wasn't that peaceful either. Therefore, this was the language of the Arabs. Look, an Arab without a religion, he's a violent person. With or without a religion, they were raised on the sword and the horse and fighting and honor killing and so on. With or without a religion. Now you have a religion on top of the problem that we already have. Okay. And the religion, God's word, that's what we all believe as religious people, it's God's word. But you can't interpret God's word by the mind of a normal human being. Therefore, we have many interpretations of the Quran. Thousands of books have been written to interpret the Quran. Why can't I present a different interpretation for the Muslims in Australia or the Muslims in the UK? Why is it that I have to be attacked? It's not like there's only one interpretation of the Quran. There are many interpretations. Thousands and thousands. Some of them have even been burnt and no longer exist, and we still have hundreds of thousands of interpretations. So, introducing another interpretation is a more realistic approach to solving the problem. And taking the hadith is not untouchable. The hadith is touchable. You can remove it. All of it.
You'd remove all the hadiths?
Most of them, yes.
Because they are messed up. Man.
Yes, most of them, yes.
And a lot, yeah.
Look at Bukhari.
Yeah.
Bukhari came 200 years after Muhammad.
He was a historian.
A historian, a scholar for dollar, a blind man, who never saw Muhammad, never lived with him, and also not even an Arab. He doesn't read Arabic. He's from Bukhara, from Persia. And he wrote in detail the sexual life of Prophet Muhammad. How the hell did you know? How did you know?
You're on about him stating that he had sex with Aisha when she was 9.
Look, Aisha wasn't 9 or 6.
No, Shias do not accept that, right?
No, no one accepts that. This is
Well, you know what I ask imams?
Yeah.
Any imams I've met, I ask that question because something for me would be very difficult for anyone who follows Islam is accepting that the true messenger of God come down and married a 6-year-old child and had sex with her when she was 9. So I ask every imam I meet, do you accept that? And they say yes. Right. They say yes because it's in Sahih Bukhari.
No, they say yes because they're hiding something from you.
What are they hiding?
Okay, let me tell you. The clergy, the clerical system, we have all agreed, our system, let's say the Vatican of Islam, we've all agreed that we need to tell the world that Aisha was 6 years old or 9 years old. We've agreed to tell the world.
Why?
She wasn't 6
Why
or
would
9.
you agree to tell
She
her?
was 21.
I've heard the argument. I've heard this argument. But why would you agree?
Why? And this is the first time I say this on camera.
Okay.
What's more important in Islam is that Muhammad marries a virgin.
So she weren't a virgin. You're saying she had been about. Aisha had been about. So you're all lying because you want everyone to think he married a pure girl, whereas really he married a... Oh my God, that's a different side to the argument. Sorry for laughing.
I
at
can't. No, I want you to laugh. I can't say any more, but you got it. For safety reasons, I can't say any more. But
Okay,
let me continue.
So that would be the argument, because I have heard this. I've heard it put as a Shia argument. We don't. When I meet Shias, no, we don't accept that she was that age. She was 21.
But they don't tell you why.
But you'd say the reason why was because she'd never have been a virgin.
Never.
You don't say that.
And
She'd
the
never been a
only
virgin at
reason,
21.
the only way to make
sure.
her a virgin is to push her age all the way back to 6.
Which you believe, yeah, but that's what if you say the Islamic clergy around the world do. But then Sahih Bukhari,
He's one of the people
he's
that...
one of the people that you believe would be pushing this book,
Yes.
even 200 years after Muhammad's death.
How many scholars were there 200 years after Muhammad's death? Probably only 10 or 20.
But then what those people are doing to hide that fact is introducing paedophilia, legitimising paedophilia from one end of this world, one end of this planet to the other.
But their argument is that many other religions have that, so it's not that bad. It's better than Muhammad not marrying a virgin. Because look, there's another political aspect to it.
You're going to get absolutely slaughtered for this, you realise this?
Let me finish. Or if I'm going to get slaughtered, I might as well finish. There is another argument to it. The wife of Muhammad needs to be pure because she will be spreading much of the religion after him. And also, she's a political figure. You cannot sell the idea or the lie that Gabriel came onto Muhammad and showed him her picture from heaven if she wasn't a virgin. Like, at least she has to be on the level of Virgin Mary.
First time I've ever heard this.
But this is the question. Why is it that the majority of Muslims would like to paint this glorious image of Muhammad's wife, Aisha, but not do that for his own mother? Why? Because his mother, she died, and there's no political benefits in doing that for her. But Aisha, the more sacred we can make her look, the better it is for the religion. It's all politics.
It's all lies. What about, this will be a question that I have to ask you anyway, because most people who sit on my side of the fence, I've read the comments, many people think you're great in the sense that finally we have an imam who accepts there's violent verses instructing people to kill us. He accepts all of these things. If I ask, if you accept that from the Quran, why are you still a Muslim?
Firstly, the Quran itself, to me and to many like me. So if you were to ask me how many Muslims think like you, I would say in the millions. Less than 5 million. How many think exactly like you, your opinions and everything? 500,000. Where are they based? Mainly in the Middle East. Do we have prominent figures that come out and speak? Yes, we do. What's the problem? They don't speak in English, so you don't hear of them. But if you were to go to Memory TV and so on, you'll find many who speak good words. Like you can go onto Memory and see that they have people that speak common sense and are Muslim presenters and scholars and so on. Not all of them are radicals. We do have good people there. These people, the problem is they don't speak English, so you don't hear of them. I'm not bringing anything new to the table.
Okay.
I'm just from that minority that thinks this way. Why am I still a Muslim? Firstly, this minority, our interpretation of the Quran is that the Quran is a historical book, a book of examples, a book of wisdom, a book of stories, a book of events, a book of certain jurisprudential rulings. Don't drink, don't hurt your family, respect your parents and so on.
What about beat your wife?
Beat your wife is a whole new issue, and I can go through that with you now.
Go on.
But We'll go on to
Go on
meeting
to
the
that in a
wife.
minute,
For me, the hadith is out the window. I don't approve of the hadith. It's nothing to me. If I approve of the hadith, I approve of, for example, Sahifa Sajjadiyya, which is a book written by one of the grandsons of Prophet Muhammad. The treatise of rights for the human being. It speaks about the rights of the human body and the rights of your children by a man named Imam Sajjad. And we see Muhammad differently. The minority of Muslims see Prophet Muhammad differently. We don't believe he wanted to conquer the world. Like I just told you, he had 3,000 soldiers when he died. How is he going to go to the Prince of Persia and say, either you become Muslim or I'll come and I'll chop your head off? Doesn't make sense. The guy just took over the Roman Empire. Things don't add up. Sometimes in order for us to motivate, the clergymen to motivate these children, we make up lies. And we say, yeah, this Muslim warrior, the companion of Muhammad's fathers-in-law, walked into a battlefield and in 1 hour they chopped 1,000 necks. How do you do that? You can't do that with chickens, let alone Arab warriors. You can't chop 1,000 necks in 1 hour. It doesn't work like that.
But they believe because Allah was on
Exactly.
their side.
And you know, we sprinkle a bit of dressing on top with the 72 virgins and all these myths and so on. And
Can I ask you, okay, the 72 virgins, do they get 28 young men?
there's no such thing as 72 virgins.
Because you don't accept the hadiths. Because that's where the figure is stated in the hadiths. Even in the Quran, there's like 3 or 4 verses in the Quran that talk about getting young boys who look like pearls in the afterlife to do whatever you want with. What's that?
In heaven,
Yeah.
we're talking, you know, all Abrahamic religions believe that in heaven there's no longer something called bad or evil. It's all pleasure and it's all rewards, whether it be rivers of alcohol for Muslims,
Yep.
or whether it be rivers of whatever's forbidden for other people. There's no disobeying God. Everything is allowed in heaven. That's the idea of it. Therefore, we can't disagree with what's in paradise. It's all there. Everything is legal.
Young boys?
There's no such thing as young boys.
No, so it's just
Wildan mukhalladun, young men.
young men.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a
young
boy,
men. Okay,
a
young
boy is different from a rajul. A rajul is a man. A boy is a young man.
When they talk
Tifl is a
when
child.
they talk a huri,
Huri is a term used to describe a very beautiful woman.
okay.
But the way they describe it in hadith is that she will come to you. The boy will come to you. Therefore, I don't really see. Who said we're going to go paradise anyway? But yeah, I don't really see that as my priority. Let's
This
argue.
is the first opportunity I've had, because usually if I ask these questions, I'm usually getting a right mouthful. And,
Yeah.
and I'm interested to know what
It's
someone
nonsense.
who still sits as a Muslim but accepts a lot of the faults and problems that are there.
We don't know if we're going to go hell or heaven. Focus on this earth and let's solve our problems. Later on, let's talk about what we believe as religious people. Coming back to my belief why I'm still a Muslim.
Yep.
I told you that the Quran for us is a book of history, a book of developments, a book of... It's not a book that orders me to go and kill people every single day. We read it differently.
It orders some to, though.
Orders who?
Some people take
The majority, not
Yeah.
some. The majority.
majority.
Because they read it that way.
Okay, yeah.
The hadiths for us, not a problem, at the window. Whatever doesn't look, if I open a book of hadith and I find the problem in the book, the problem is with the book, not with my brain. My brain is perfect.
Okay.
So for me, if a book tells me that in order for my wife to learn how to perform a ritual washing, she needs to undress in front of another man, and he teaches her, no, the whole book goes out the window. That's not going to happen. Or it tells me that my prophet, for example, slept with 11 wives, 9 or 11 in one night. What was he doing the rest of the time? Is he a prophet, or what is he? Is he running a, you know, it's something we don't believe, out the window straight away. Then it comes to role models in life. I told you we see Muhammad differently. We don't believe he had a massive army that took over. No. We believe the invasions happened after him, because they did. The caliphates, the transition from caliphate to kingship happened after him. And do you ask me, are his fathers-in-law terrorists? I say yes. Of course they are. I will not lie to you. How about the wars that happened? That was the language of the time. Muhammad was exiled. He fought back. And this is how the world worked back then. Do we continue that? Of course not. Of course not. And other figures in Islam. Why am I still a Muslim? There's a man by the name of Hussein. the grandson of Muhammad.
Yep, this is what we have the massive Jalu March every year.
There you go.
And then the real radical Wahhabis wait at the end of the Jalu March, screaming obscenities
To fight
the grandson, the people who are worshipping the grandson of Hussein.
The followers of Hussein believe that after Prophet Muhammad, corruption reached such a level, killing, invasions, that the grandson of Muhammad, his daughter's son, Hussein, rose to reform. He is our inspiration.
So you recognise him as a prophet as well?
Not a prophet.
Not a prophet?
But an infallible being.
Okay.
And he was beheaded, and his whole family was taken hostage. Women and children, 72 people were massacred, butchered in Karbala, Iraq.
Okay.
50 years after Prophet Muhammad had died. By 100,000 soldiers. Completely butchered. Their heads were chopped off and they were carried from Iraq to Syria. This is the man we follow. Therefore, I believe that if the world heard of a man by the name of Hussein and what Hussein stood for, a lot better than Osama bin Laden, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahab, and Al Saud, and Khamenei, and these people.
Yeah, okay.
So this is where we get our inspiration, and this is why I still hold on to Islam, only because of a man by the name of Hussein. If Hussein wasn't in the whole chapter of Islam and the rising and to bring change, I wouldn't have hope. Hussein gives me hope.
What would you say to the people, as many would say, that you're just practicing taqiyya on the non-Muslim audience? You're lying to further the goals of Islam.
Right.
Because that is something that I've seen thrown at you by a lot of people.
Oh no, I get
it's
it
also
a lot.
a term that I've used a lot, not on yourself, because I actually find it refreshing sitting talking to you. I find it refreshing to see that I'd love our government to talk and understand a lot of the problems we face, but they're so in bed with the Wahhabis, the Salafists. In fact, my local council, what do you think? My local council give £140,000 of our taxpayers' money to the Salafist mosque that has produced Stockholm bomber, fertiliser bomb plot after bomb plot after bomb plot. So yeah, I find it refreshing to see that you speak honestly. I don't really hold the same hope for the future, but in that sense, what about taqiyya?
You said two things. Taqiyya.
Because Sunnis will tell us that, that's the Shias who practice taqiyya. Because you'll have quotes from Muhammad, who is known as the ultimate deceiver, and that you can lie if it furthers the goal of Islam.
Firstly, taqiyya is applied and implemented in situations where you need to save your life. What I'm doing is against taqiyya. What I'm doing is putting myself in danger.
I agree.
So I'm not protecting anything. Secondly, furthering the cause of Islam, I haven't had one person convert because of me until now. And I don't call for people to enter Islam. And even if I did, let's say I converted 50 people, and there's a bomb goes off in Sydney. Is that really gonna preserve and maintain the image of Islam? We're dealing with the most messed up religion on earth. We're dealing with a religion that's messed. What am I telling the truth gonna do? What is that gonna do? It's like putting perfume on something that's already messed up. And I'm not an organization, I'm not a movement, I'm Tawhidi. There's not much I can do, even if I wanted to paint a good image. You can't, because on the other side, how many people do you have? When I'm asleep, they're working.
Oh, completely, which is what I had said with Quilliam. How many people have you converted your way of thinking in the last 12 months? Probably none. But yet the other side have converted thousands of prisoners, thousands on the streets with dawah stalls. What message would you give to our government? If you say, knowing what you know, you've been at the top of the scholarship of Islam, you've learned from the best, you know the practices they're using to further the goals of Islam, which at times can be problematic. What message would you give to our government in how to limit and deal with the problems that we have?
Two things that I'd like to say to answer your question. One, the people in your government right now are not qualified to lead at all. So from the lowest form of government, which is the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, up to Theresa May.
You're not a fan of Sadiq Khan?
No. I wouldn't have him manager of McDonald's, let alone mayor of London. I'm not joking. I'm honest. I would not have him manager of McDonald's. In fact, the whole world, the whole Arabian Gulf, and I don't want to sound racist, but this is the reality. The Arabian Gulf, to them, London was like paradise on earth. or you studied in London, you honeymooned in London.
Not anymore.
When they heard that the mayor of London is not a white British man who knows the values and history of this country and is a man of Pakistani descent, they lost respect for London. Why? Because Pakistanis don't have that position in the Arabian Gulf. If you've been there, you know what the situation is like.
I know, yeah.
We don't want to sound racist, but this is the reality.
But Pakistan are probably the most problematic Islamic nation in the world.
Exactly, and I haven't heard him criticize or call for the closing of the Pakistani embassy or anything. I haven't heard anything like that
Even
from
though
him.
there's terrorism going, yeah.
So I don't believe in Sadiq Khan at all. When it comes to Theresa May, there's a big difference between understanding the Muslim community and having good relationships with them and actually stopping terrorism and extremism within the community. You having good relations with them doesn't mean you have control over the extremist elements within them. Therefore, this is all I have to say when it comes to Theresa May. Perhaps her office might want to employ certain experts, not imams or scholars.
Yeah, that's what they do.
Experts.
After 7/7, our government set up a panel room of approximately 100 Muslim leaders across the country. 80% of those men were what people would refer to as Islamists. Were pushing or blaming everything on foreign policy, not accepting any fault. And that's who they set up as their advisory board. That was after 7/7.
I will not deny
They're in
the
bed
fact.
with the worst people.
Yeah,
in
I
this
won't
nation.
deny the fact that, yes, Western interference in the Middle East does cause backlash. But come on, the ideology of ISIS was there before Hillary Clinton funded it.
Yes.
It's not like they made terrorism. It was already there.
Yeah, under different names and different guises.
It already existed from the first Islamic Caliphate up until today. It already existed.
Just getting on to yourself, what have you received? What sort of reaction have you received from the Muslim community and from the non-Muslim community since you've started this very public speaking out? And I would say you're completely putting your life on the line in many circumstances. Yeah, what reception have you received?
Very mixed. From the Muslim, two types of reactions, and from the non-Muslim community, again, another two type. The Muslim community, the regular Muslims that you see every day, some are with me, some are not with me. Those that are with me, they divide into groups. Some would speak out that they are with me, and you'll find them a very small minority on my pages online. And some would say, we're with him, but we don't want to speak out. We'll lose our jobs and so on.
And families?
Yeah, that's the regular Muslims. Then you have the imams. And the Australian government knows. Most Muslim imams visit me in my house, within my city.
Yeah.
They visit me, they invite me, they sit with me, we discuss, we go out together. But when I say come out on Sky News and criticize, they don't want to do that because they're employed under a contract and they have a family to feed. So there is hope because I see what's happening. They are with me, but not publicly. Then we have the non-Muslim community. The non-Muslim community, when they look at me, they say, okay, he's a right wing. There's no such thing as right wing. We're dealing with terrorism.
I agree.
If you criticize ISIS, it doesn't mean you have a political stance. It means you have a humanitarian stance. You're a human being that is against butchering other human beings. So the left attacked me for a very long time, constantly, day after day after day, article after interview, or radio. Every day I was being attacked in Australia. And then they came to
left
realize,
attack you?
yes.
The left attack you. You're a Muslim imam coming
And the
out
left
speaking against terrorism.
The left are the
The
real
left.
bigots, not the right. The left are the real racist bigots. It is them. The left, whenever they see a moderate Muslim or a peaceful Muslim who criticizes the majority of texts, they come and they say, oh no, a Muslim can't be like that. A Muslim is like Anjem Chaudhry. A real Muslim is like these radicals. So this guy must be a fake. Bash him. And what do we do about the radicals? Understand and tolerate them. They are the real bigots who in their minds believe that a real Muslim can't be a moderate. And this is what I've first-hand experienced.
You've experienced that from the left.
I call myself a peaceful man. Oh no, you're criticizing this book that calls for beheading people. So what do you want me to do? I want the Bukhari completely banned from universities. Why should it be used as a source for writing a thesis or whatever?
We have schools across this country that are having these books. Schools, junior schools,
Yes.
juniors, children's schools, madrasas. Would you stop madrasas?
I stopped going to madrasas from the age of 12.
Would you stop madrasas in our country?
Of course.
You would, of course.
First day,
First day you'd close down madrasas.
I would. Day one. Because, I mean, it's nothing's hidden anymore. There have been spy cameras that have gone inside
Yeah,
and
we've seen
exposed
what they're
everything.
teaching. They're beating children.
There's nothing hidden. And these corruptions, I once upon a time used to teach them. I used to teach them once upon a time. So I know what's being taught as well.
Okay. Fascinating. Fascinating.
My pleasure.
I'll ask you again, when you come back to England, will you visit us again? We'll be in the
Definitely.
process of setting up a new show, and I think the British public would like to hear a lot more.
Definitely, definitely.
Thank you, man. I wish you
God
luck. And I
bless you.
wish
Thank you very
safety.
much.
Yeah?
Thank you. Thank
Cheers,
you.
man.
Thank you.
I just want to say a personal thank you to every single person who supported me. I couldn't bring you these videos without your support. We have no big funders, no big donators. So this is literally by you, for you. So I want to say a personal thank you. And if anyone else wants to keep up to date with what we're doing, we've got plenty of exciting things coming up now. I've gone independent. You can do so at tommyrobinson.online. Thank you.